Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today, let's take a look at two different social, economic and political systems, socialism and capitalism. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. Several years ago, Pew Research Center, which is a non-profit research organization with a high reputation here in America, conducted a survey on American people's opinions about socialism and capitalism. According to the survey, 55% of Americans had a negative impression of socialism, while 42% expressed a positive view. The same research also found that about 2/3 said they had a positive view of capitalism, and only 1/3 viewed it negatively. Considering the fact that America is the biggest capitalist country, I certainly did not find those results surprising. However, as a professor of sociology, I found myself wondering about the socio-economic status of the survey participants. According to most social scientists, myself included, whether a person views a social system positively or negatively has a lot to do with their socio-economic status. As I shall explain in this video, capitalism is a system that definitely benefits certain groups or certain classes of people, in the same way as socialism is in the interests of other groups or classes of people. When I saw those research results, I was also wondering how much knowledge ordinary people here in America have about socialism. According to my observations, for many people, socialism is a word that often evokes a fear or hatred, even though they may not know much about it. For them, capitalism is the only system which they know and which they assume is all they need. That's why I'm making this video to compare the two systems and explain how different they are. What I will be doing is to look at the two systems and point out the differences as a professor of sociology and philosophy. I may create a video specifically talking about the strengths and weaknesses of either of them from my personal perspective in the future. Please let me know if you are interested. Let's first of all take a look at the origins of the two concepts, capitalism and socialism. The idea of capitalism can be traced back to the 16th century, but it was during the Industrial Revolution that modern capitalism was born in Great Britain, where the Industrial Revolution first started. As a system, capitalism spread across the world in the early 19th century and afterwards. Nowadays, capitalism is the dominant economic and political system in Western countries, represented, of course, by the United States of America. On the other hand, the intellectual roots of socialism can go back to ancient Greek times, when Plato, for example, described a society that was a socialist in essence. Since then, a few other philosophers had envisioned a similar society. However, the modern theory of socialism as we understand it today was developed by Karl Marx, the great German philosopher. Since the time of Karl Marx, socialism has become the major system in countries such as the former Soviet Union, China, Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, and so on. In this video, I will break down the major differences between socialism and capitalism from two perspectives, economic and philosophical. Some people may argue that they can also be analyzed from a political perspective, and they are right. It is true that socialism is often associated with dictatorship and capitalism is linked with democracy. But, in my opinion, socialism is not inherently dictatorial, just as capitalism is not inherently democratic. But as I said, I may create a video specifically talking about the strengths and weaknesses of either of them from my personal perspective in the future. So, please let me know if you are interested and subscribe to this channel. In economics, capitalism is a system where individuals own businesses and factories. In other words, businesses are privately owned. In addition, capitalism is a free market system, meaning that production of goods and their prices are largely determined by a free market based on supply and demand with minimal governmental intervention. By the way, I made a video about how the supply and demand system works in a capitalist society. If you are interested, please check it out on my channel. In capitalist society, seeking as much profit as possible is the ultimate goal. For example, here in America, we often measure the success of a business or an individual based on how much money they make. Such emphasis on profit-making usually results in fierce competition between individuals and businesses. Another result is that big gaps between rich people and poor people often exist in capitalist society. On the other hand, socialism is a system where businesses and factories are primarily owned and controlled by the government. There is no competitor to the government, of course. Besides, resources are arranged and allocated by a central planning system. Prices of goods are controlled by the government as well. The focus is on social welfare and collective well-being rather than individual wealth. The ultimate goal is to achieve a more equitable distribution of wealth. As a result, social classes are not as clearly defined as in capitalist society. Speaking of distribution of wealth, I often find myself trying to answer a difficult but important question in my sociology classes. Does capitalism encourage more selfishness? Or are people less selfish under a socialist system? I think it is a legitimate question because when the motive of production is to earn as much profit as possible, you can't help wondering whether it leads to more selfishness. However, this topic, which is philosophically and politically debatable, is beyond the scope of this video. Different people will naturally have different opinions. So, I will leave it for my future videos. Again, please let me know if you are interested. Now, let's discuss socialism and capitalism from a philosophical point of view. All the philosophical discussions of any political and economic system ultimately address one fundamental issue: the relationship between the individual and society as a whole. To put it another way, one fundamental philosophical question needs to be answered if anyone wants to discuss which system is the best. And the question is, Should the individual's rights be limited for the good of society, or should society's welfare give way to the good of the individual? Different answers will lead to different social, political, and economic systems. In the history of philosophy, for example, there were discussions about monarchy, democracy, aristocracy, etc. Of course, socialism and capitalism can be discussed in the same way. For example, we can look at their differences from the angle of freedom, because they advocate two different kinds of freedom. Capitalism argues for what is known in philosophy as negative freedom, that is, freedom from interference, either from governmental restraint or from anyone else's interference. In a typical capitalist society, people are allowed to pursue whatever they desire in their own ways. On the other hand, socialism advocates the so-called positive freedom, that is, the freedom to have something. Supporters of socialism argue that people should have what they need, such as housing, health care, a job, education, and so on. Everyone, especially the less privileged ones, should have what they need for a living. The differences between capitalism and socialism can also be discussed in terms of equality. In capitalism, everyone is supposed to be equal in terms of opportunity. People who support capitalism often use sports as an analogy. According to them, if everyone starts at the same time from the same place, everyone will have the same chance of winning the race. In philosophy, this idea is known as equality of opportunity. But of course, not everyone will win. And that is known as the inequality of outcome. On the other hand, socialism focuses on the equality of outcome. That is why socialist notion is sometimes referred to as egalitarianism in philosophy. According to egalitarian ideas, everyone should earn more or less the same amount of money, no matter if you are a medical doctor or a cab driver. In socialism, occupations are not used to judge an individual's success or failure or contributions to society. In this sense, the differences between capitalism and socialism are basically the differences between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. Since the emergence of socialism following Karl Marx's theory, there have been continuing debates about which system is better. In particular, the debate drew much attention during the Cold War years, when the Eastern and the Western blocs were competing with each other. Though the Cold War ended with the collapse of the socialist bloc, the debate is still going on. But the debate is now largely domestic, not a debate between countries. It is about whether it is possible to combine and balance individual liberties with a more equal distribution of social goods. According to some people, China, which now calls itself socialism with Chinese characteristics, is a good example that shows egalitarianism and libertarianism can be reconciled. In China, since the so-called open-door policies were adopted in the late 1970s, China has gone through huge changes. It is now a mixture of both socialism and capitalism. Many businesses, for example, are privately owned now. although the government still plays an active role in regulating economic activities. The rapid economic growth in China in the past several decades proves, according to some people, that a good balance between government regulations and the individual pursuit of prosperity is possible and even desirable. Of course, not everyone agrees. But again, that is a topic for another video in the future. To conclude this video, socialism and capitalism as two systems are fundamentally different. Their differences can be analyzed in terms of economics and philosophy. From an economic point of view, socialism is a central planning system where the government controls major economic activities, whereas capitalism is a free market economy where individuals pursue their own interests without much of governmental interference. From a philosophical point of view, socialism differs from capitalism in terms of their applications of individual rights, freedom, and equality. Well, that is all for today. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.